Welcome to Wife Cheating Story. I hope you have an enjoyable and relaxing time listening. Let's get started.
Before we begin, let me know where you're tuning in from down in the comments. And if you enjoy this story, don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss our next tale. The early morning sun streamed through the window blinds, casting long stripes of light across the hardwood floors Cameron had laid with his own two hands. This was the house he and Angela had called their nest for nearly 2 decades, settled in a quiet suburb of Knoxville, Tennessee. The air in the kitchen was thick with the scent of toast and freshly brewed coffee, while a soft country tune drifted from a small speaker. It was the very picture of the warm, peaceful life everyone dreams of when they think of a happy marriage. Cameron, 47, came down the stairs in his usual work attire, a faded brown shirt and a pair of jeans dusted with a faint layer of paint. Though he owned the family construction business, his style had always been unpretentious and down-to-earth. He believed that to earn his crew's respect, he had to show them he wasn't afraid to get his hands dirty. Angela, his wife, stood at the sink, dressed in a cream-colored business dress, her hair pulled back in a neat bun. Her face held the calm composure you'd expect from someone in human resources. She handed him a mug of coffee with a smile that seemed to say, "Good morning, my love." For a moment, their eyes met. Cameron's mind drifted back to his 20s when he and Angela had first met. She was the only person who had believed in his dream of building a small, family-run company, even when he had nothing but his own two hands. They had weathered so many storms together, from the lean months when money was tight to the present day, where his company was finally stable. He had built this house for her, from the foundation and frame to the very last shingle on the roof. Every brick, every beam, felt like a testament to his love for his wife. That morning, Angela was in a hurry. "I have to get to the office early," she said. "We have a meeting about some HR procedures." Cameron smiled and kissed her lightly on the cheek. "I'll finish up early and swing by the flower shop." "Dinner together tonight?" Angela nodded, then walked out the door, leaving behind a lingering warmth that was, for some reason, tinged with a subtle distance. After breakfast, Cameron headed to his company, where he and his team were planning the renovation of a row of old townhouses along the Tennessee River. His day was busy, but he always made time for his routine stop at a familiar coffee shop to chat for a few minutes with his younger brother Isaac, an easygoing mechanic. "Always working, big brother," Isaac teased. "Don't forget to make some time for yourself. You don't want to keep your wife waiting." That evening, when Cameron returned home, he found Angela had already prepared dinner. The house was filled with the fragrant aroma of rosemary chicken. They sat across from each other at the dining table, talking about their day. Occasionally, Angela would deftly steer the conversation toward his project's progress, the company's monthly earnings, or their future investments. Cameron felt a quiet pride that she took such an interest in his work. On the weekend, Fiona, Angela's best friend, came to visit. A high school art teacher, she had a penchant for flowy, hippie-style dresses and colorful scarves. Fiona chattered on about her students and an upcoming local art exhibit. Cameron always enjoyed her visits. She brought a youthful energy to the house, even though she was nearly 40 herself. Later, as Fiona and Angela strolled into the backyard, Cameron was tidying some papers on the coffee table. He happened to overhear Fiona say offhandedly, "You've been working so late recently. Does Cam get upset?" Angela's reply was soft. "He probably doesn't notice. I've just been a little busy." Her words were nearly lost in the chirping of birds, but Cameron caught them, and his heart gave a slight, uneasy lurch. Since when had she been staying at the office so late, and how had he not noticed? That night, Cameron lay in bed, his mind restless. He remembered the difficult early days of the company. Angela had been his rock, even working extra hours herself to help cover their expenses. She never seemed to tire, driven by the simple dream of a cozy home. Now that dream was a reality. They had the house, the company, and a stable life, yet a strange premonition stirred within him. Nothing was clear, but he'd started to notice a fleeting anxiety in Angela's eyes. "It's just work stress," he told himself. "Human resources must have its ups and downs." He closed his eyes, letting sleep pull him back to the sweet memories of the past. to a time when a single smile from Angela was all it took to make him want to work twice as hard. The next morning, they had breakfast together as usual, and Angela's smile was as gentle as ever. Cameron pushed his worries aside, choosing to believe that his life was still as happy as it had always been. On Monday, Angela left the house at 6 in the morning, claiming she had to handle a mountain of paperwork related to recent layoffs. It was early March in Knoxville. The wind was still cold, but the sky was a clear, brilliant blue. Cameron kissed his wife goodbye and drove to the construction site, where he spent the day overseeing the painting and renovation of a strip of storefronts. When he got home that afternoon, the house was empty and dark. This was rare. Angela was almost always home before him, with a pot of hot soup simmering on the stove or waiting to watch their favorite TV show together. He called her. "I'm still in a meeting with my director," she said. "I'll probably be late." He hung up, a hollow feeling settling in his stomach. It wasn't until 8 o'clock that Angela finally walked in, looking exhausted. A faint, unfamiliar perfume clung to her coat. She quickly put her phone away when she saw Cameron approach, a flash of tension in her eyes. "Late night, huh?" Cameron asked, his voice full of concern. Angela's reply was short. "It's work. I'm dead tired." She went upstairs to change. Cameron assumed she was telling the truth. Maybe her workload had become overwhelming. He managed to put together a simple pasta dinner. The meal was silent, a stark contrast to their usual lively conversations. Angela scrolled through her phone, giving him only absent-minded, one-word answers. When he suggested a walk by the river on the weekend, she gave a non-committal nod. Day after day, Angela continued to come home late. At dinner, she was like a stranger, sometimes distracted, other times impatient. Whenever Cameron tried to ask her what was wrong, she would just force a smile and say, "Work has been really stressful lately." One afternoon, as Cameron was about to leave for a meeting with a client, Fiona stopped by, hoping to take Angela out for a spontaneous lunch. Seeing Cameron pouring coffee, she remarked, "Angela told me she had enough energy to go shopping yesterday. I was teasing her about not inviting you along." Cameron froze for a second. Angela had told him she was too tired and went to bed early, and she had come home late, blaming it on a meeting. He didn't press for details, just offered a tight, forced smile to hide the unease churning inside him. That night, he prepared a simple dinner. Angela still wasn't home. Fiona's words from earlier echoed in his mind, along with Angela's strange behavior over the past few weeks. A question he'd been avoiding began to surface. What if things aren't as simple as I think? When Angela finally appeared, she seemed more hurried and exhausted than ever. Cameron tried to start a conversation, but her responses were vacant. He wanted to question her, but one look at her weary eyes made him hold his tongue. That night, he lay with his back to her, his thoughts racing, connecting the scattered, unusual moments. He didn't know when his wife had started to drift away, only that he was still desperately trying to believe everything was fine. The following Friday, Cameron was reviewing their joint bank account statement. His brow furrowed when he saw a large charge from an expensive downtown restaurant they had never been to together. When he asked, Angela gave a breezy explanation. "Oh, I was treating a client. The company will reimburse me." Cameron didn't want to be suspicious, but her tone was so dismissive, as if she wanted the conversation to end as quickly as possible. Later that afternoon, while driving his truck to deliver construction materials, he noticed a strange scent lingering on the passenger seat where Angela had sat the night before. It wasn't her perfume. It was a woody, spicy, fragrant sandalwood, and something else that reminded him of an expensive men's cologne. He tried to rationalize it, telling himself she must have just sat near someone at work. Then there was the gym bag in the trunk of her car, which only deepened his confusion. Angela rarely exercised. When he'd asked about it, she'd casually replied, "I'm thinking of signing up for a yoga class again. Just haven't gotten around to it." But the bag sat there for days, untouched, the clothes inside still perfectly folded as if they were brand new. As night fell, Cameron grew more restless. He thought back to their engagement anniversary, when Angela had promised they would one day travel to Europe to see the Eiffel Tower. They had painted so many beautiful dreams together. Now, she avoided any deep conversation, always falling back on the excuse of work. The next day, Fiona visited again, bringing a freshly baked pie. Just as Cameron was leaving the living room, he heard her lower her voice and say something to Angela, her expression tense. Angela quickly motioned for her to be quiet, glancing in his direction. Cameron caught their strained expressions reflected in the mirror on the wall. The pieces were starting to connect, forming a picture he didn't want to see. That night, he tossed and turned, a parade of red flags marching through his mind. The time Angela had worn a strange man's shirt, claiming she had borrowed it from a colleague because she was cold. The time she'd complained of a headache and come home 3 hours late. There were too many inconsistencies, too many oddities piling up, leaving him with a gnawing sense of dread. Is this just jealousy? He wondered. They had trusted each other for so many years. Angela had never betrayed him. Their love was as solid as the foundation he had built for their home, but his gut was telling him something was deeply wrong, and he couldn't ignore that feeling any longer. By the beginning of April, the air had warmed, and cherry blossoms were beginning to bloom in their front yard. Cameron planned to take Angela out for a walk downtown to celebrate their 20th wedding anniversary. He cherished the day, already picturing a romantic dinner with candles and wine at her favorite restaurant. But Angela had forgotten. She announced she would be away for the entire weekend at a human resources conference. Cameron stood frozen for a moment before reminding her, "It's our anniversary." Her eyes went wide as if she didn't understand. When realization dawned, she could only stammer an apology, saying she'd already committed to her boss and couldn't possibly back out. Though she looked genuinely sorry, Cameron felt a sharp, physical pain in his chest. The night before she left, Cameron overheard her on the phone. Her voice was low, punctuated by soft giggles. Suddenly, he heard a man's voice on the other end, clear through the speaker. "Good night, my love." Angela abruptly ended the call when Cameron knocked on the bedroom door. She claimed it was just Fiona, joking around, but there was no mistaking a man's voice for a woman's. The next morning, Angela kissed him distractedly on the cheek, wheeled her suitcase out the door, and left. He stood on the porch, watching her car disappear into the flow of traffic. For the first time in his life, he felt an anxiety so profound, it was like a fire in his gut. He was not a fool to be led blindly. His love for her ran deep, but his reason was now screaming at him louder than ever before. That afternoon, he sat alone on the back porch, watching a steady rain fall. Isaac came by with a couple of beers. They drank in silence, the comfortable quiet that had always existed between them. Isaac, who knew his brother better than anyone, finally asked cautiously, "Everything okay, Cam?" Cameron just gave a sad, empty smile, not answering the question directly. His mind replayed all the signs. Angela's disinterest in their life together, the shady expenses, the clumsy lies about the late-night phone call. He felt like he was standing at a crossroads. Either continue to play the fool or find the truth no matter how much it hurt. Finally, he took a long, deep breath and switched off the porch light. "If she's lying to me," he whispered to himself, "what am I going to do?" The pain was a dull ache in his chest, but it was accompanied by a new, cold resolve. Cameron knew he couldn't just sit by and watch his world crumble in silence. The rain continued to fall, tapping a lonely rhythm on the tin roof. Cameron looked up at the dark sky, his heart clenching. Then he stood up, collected the empty beer cans, and told Isaac he should head home. As for him, he was about to do something he never imagined he would have to do in his life. He was going to uncover the secrets of his own marriage. Angela returned late Sunday evening from her conference. Cameron had tidied the house and left a simple dinner waiting for her. She walked in, kicked off her shoes, and her face, which had held a flicker of guilt, quickly shifted to a bright, forced smile. "Have you eaten? I'm exhausted." Cameron just nodded, swallowing the mountain of suspicion that weighed him down. Instead of confronting her, he became quiet, observant. Early Monday morning, Cameron sat in the corner of his office at the construction company, a new notebook open in front of him. He began to meticulously document everything the times Angela came home, the strange expenses, the unfamiliar perfume, the lies. Each new clue was recorded in careful, deliberate handwriting, Later, while organizing supplies in the warehouse, he called Isaac over. "Are you sure about this, Cam?" Isaac asked, his voice filled with worry. "Maybe it's just a misunderstanding." Cameron was quiet for a long moment before he answered. "I don't want to jump to conclusions, but my gut is telling me to be careful." Isaac nodded, warning him not to do anything rash that could tip her off. That evening, Angela was late again. Cameron waited until she was in the shower, then quietly picked up the phone Shed left on the nightstand. He felt a pang of guilt for invading her privacy, but the ache in his heart urged him on. To his frustration, the phone was locked with a new passcode. Then he remembered the tablet they kept in the living room. Angela had once synced her messages to it for work. He checked it, only to find she had logged out of her account. He took a deep breath, acting as if nothing was wrong, and put it back. After dinner, Angela went to bed early, complaining of fatigue. Cameron tried to hold her, wrapping his arm around her from behind, hoping to find a flicker of their old warmth. She remained stiff, gently pushing him away, saying she needed to rest. He lay awake long into the night, the cold space between them growing wider. "I have to get to the bottom of this," he thought, before it's too late. The next day, Cameron drove to an electronics store and bought a small, magnetic GPS tracker. He remembered Angela mentioning a few client meetings in the suburbs. Just as she was leaving the house, he discreetly attached the device under her car. His heart pounded with a sense of betrayal, but he forced himself to walk away. That afternoon, he installed the tracking software on his phone. The map lit up, showing her car's route. The final stop was a street on the west side of Knoxville, nowhere near her office. Just as he was studying the map, Angela emerged from the bathroom. He quickly hid his phone. "Is everything all right?" she asked, a hint of suspicion in her voice. He gave a weak smile. "Yeah, just checking the news." She frowned but didn't press him further. Late that night, Cameron sat up in bed and sent a text message to his old college friend, Marcus, now a prominent family law attorney. It wasn't time to hire him yet, but he needed to understand his rights if the worst was true. Over the next few days, Angela's emergency meetings became more frequent. The tracker on Cameron's phone showed her car making trips to the city center, often stopping for long periods near a boutique hotel just before the end of the workday. A sick, churning feeling settled in Cameron's stomach, but he remained patient, pretending to be busy with his own work to avoid suspicion. One afternoon, Fiona stopped by again. Finding Cameron home alone, she stammered, "Is Angela not back yet?" He shook his head. Fiona nervously sipped her tea, her face clouded with worry. As she was leaving, Cameron watched her closely. Her unease was palpable, as if she were burdened by a secret she was struggling to keep. That evening, Cameron told Angela he had an urgent matter at a work site. In reality, he was watching the GPS tracker. Her car was parked at a high-end downtown building that housed a luxury hotel. He parked his truck around the corner and waited. An hour later, Angela emerged, laughing with a tall, well-dressed man with slicked-back hair. They stood close together under a streetlight, and the man placed a familiar hand on the small of her back. The gesture was intimate. Cameron couldn't see his face clearly, but he felt the truth of the situation like a physical blow. He didn't approach them. Instead, he pulled his truck back, keeping his distance as he followed them to the parking garage. As they said their goodbyes, he managed to snap a few blurry photos from afar. They weren't perfect, but they were proof. He got home first, parking a few houses down so she wouldn't see his truck. When she finally walked through the door, he emerged from the kitchen, feigning surprise. "I just got back," he lied. "We ran out of materials, had to make a supply run." Angela didn't ask questions. She just sighed and said, "I'm so tired. Don't make me talk." Then she headed upstairs. The next day, Cameron met Isaac at a coffee shop and showed him the blurry photos. Isaac's jaw clenched. "Are you just going to let this happen?" Cameron shook his head. "No, but not yet. I need to find out who this guy is, and I need more evidence." Isaac ran a hand over his face, looking stunned. He had always admired Angela, thinking of her as the kindest woman he knew. They sat in silence for a few more minutes. "It's going to hurt," Cameron whispered, more to himself than to his brother. "But I have to do this. I'm not going to just walk away from everything I've built. If she betrayed me, I'll find a way to protect what's mine." One evening, Cameron was sitting at the dining table, scrolling through real estate news on the iPad while Angela was in the shower. Suddenly, a notification banner appeared at the top of the screen, a message that hadn't been cleared from the sync. It read, "Last night was unforgettable. Can't wait till he's out of the picture." The sender's name was Trevor. Cameron's heart hammered against his ribs. He tapped the notification. The message thread revealed a string of intimate exchanges, sweet nothings that confirmed Angela and this man, Trevor, had spent the night together. They were already planning a future without him. A cold sweat broke out on his brow, his hands trembling. He quickly took screenshots, emailed them to a private account, and then deleted all traces of his activity from the iPad. When Angela came out of the bathroom, he casually set the tablet down and stood up. "I'm going to get some air in the garden," he said. She gave him a brief, worried look, but didn't say anything. She was still confident, still believed he was completely in the dark. At midnight, Cameron sat alone in his small office at the end of the hall, printing the screenshots of the text messages. He sealed them in an envelope and locked it in his safe. The look in his eyes had changed. The grief was still there, but it was now overshadowed by a cold, simmering anger. The next morning, Cameron met with Marcus, the lawyer he had contacted. Sitting in the sterile office, Cameron placed the envelope on the desk. "Marcus," he said, his voice tight, "I think my wife is having an affair. I refuse to lose what I've built, and I won't let her walk away with anything she doesn't deserve. I need a plan." Marcus glanced at the papers and nodded slowly. "This is strong evidence, Cam. Now we just have to play this smart. Gather a little more information and make sure we follow the right procedures. We'll have the upper hand." As Cameron walked out of the law office, he knew he had crossed a line. There was no going back. That evening, he went home and cooked dinner for Angela, just as he always did. She smiled faintly as he set a plate in front of her. He smiled back, but his eyes held a cold glint she had never seen before. Cameron continued to play the part of the loving husband. He listened to Angela's vague excuses, pretending to believe every word. The more he played along, the more cheerful and carefree she became, occasionally bringing up future plans for a vacation or a celebration, all, he now realized, were ploys to keep him complacent. Whenever she was in the shower, he would check the iPad. She still hadn't disabled the message sync. More texts from Trevor appeared. "You drive me crazy. When are we going to make this public?" Cameron screenshotted everything. The pain was real, a constant, dull throb, but it was slowly being replaced by a steely resolve for revenge. He did not rush. He learned to mask his emotions completely. Some nights he would lie awake watching her sleep, memories of their early years together flooding his mind. How could someone betray 20 years of history, he would wonder. Then he would take a deep breath, picturing her planning to cast him aside, and his resolve would harden. A few days later, Cameron met with Marcus again. They devised a plan. He would gradually move funds from their joint account, transfer major assets into a trust under Isaac's name, and remove Angela as the beneficiary on his life insurance policies. Marcus advised him to continue gathering evidence and, above all, not to arouse any suspicion from Angela or Trevor. That evening, Angela brought up her upcoming birthday. She suggested a small party at their house with a few friends and family. A cold, calculating idea sparked in Cameron's mind. This could be the perfect stage to expose everything. He calmly agreed. Angela, thrilled, hugged him and began chattering about the guest list, mentioning she wanted to invite her boss. Cameron's smile was thin. "Of course," he said. "Invite him. The more, the merrier." That night, Cameron sat in his office, writing in his notebook under the glow of a single desk lamp. The light illuminated a face that was no longer that of the simple, adoring husband. It was hard, calculating, and patient. The game, he knew, had begun, and he was the one in control. Angela, oblivious, continued to plan her party, even being more affectionate toward Cameron. She was likely trying to soften the blow for a future divorce, hoping to secure a favorable financial settlement. Cameron watched her performance with a bitter taste in his mouth, but inside he was preparing for a storm unlike anything they had ever weathered before. A sudden downpour swept through Knoxville, leaving the late spring air heavy and damp. The office of Marcus, the lawyer Cameron had sought out, was in a historic red-brick building downtown. Wind rustled through the open window, carrying the earthy smell of rain and the distant hum of traffic. Cameron sat across from Marcus, his expression calm, but the pain hidden deep in his eyes was hard to miss. Ever since he'd held the printed messages between Angela and Trevor, a relentless torment had taken root in his soul. Marcus, a thin man with salt and pepper hair, sifted through the file Cameron had brought. He looked at Cameron with a steady gaze. "I understand," he said, his voice firm. "This evidence is strong enough to give you the upper hand in a divorce, should you decide to go through with it." Cameron nodded, his hands clenching into fists. He didn't want to wield the law as a weapon, but a betrayed heart left him with no choice but to protect the life he had painstakingly built. Marcus explained each necessary step in detail. First, Cameron had to protect his assets, remove Angela from his will, create a new one, open a separate bank account, and move valuable assets out of her reach. Marcus' words were cold and clinical, but Cameron knew it was the only way to avoid being cornered. Leaving the law office, Cameron drove through streets clogged with rush-hour traffic. The rain had stopped, leaving the pavement slick and gleaming. He pulled over at a roadside stand and ordered a coffee to go. Holding the warm cup, he watched the hurried crowds and wondered when his marriage had become so complicated. He had always believed that if he worked hard and loved his wife with all his heart, everything would be fine. But the harsh truth had forced him to become someone else, a man who was calm, calculating, and ready to fight back. When he got home that evening, he found Angela in the living room, arranging flowers. Her gaze flickered over him before returning to the glass vase. "You're home early," he said, trying to keep his voice normal. She offered a small, strained smile. "Work finished early, so I stopped by the flower shop for some lilies." He looked at her, and all he felt was the vast distance between them. She was still beautiful, still gentle, but her perfect facade now felt utterly hollow. Before bed, Cameron quietly took a stack of documents into his small downstairs office. He logged into his bank account and began transferring funds into a new private account in his name. With each security code he entered, he reminded himself that this wasn't what he wanted to do, but what he had to do. He thought of the house he had built with his own hands, the company he had nurtured for years. They were his sweat and tears, and he would not let a traitor walk away with them. The next morning, the sky was an unusually brilliant blue. Angela left early for a critical meeting. Cameron, dressed in his work clothes, drove to the family lumber yard. There, he met with Isaac and briefly explained his plan to temporarily transfer a portion of the company's ownership into his brother's name. Isaac stared at him. "Are you sure about this, Cam? Isn't this risky?" Cameron sighed. "I have to trust you, Isaac. For now, you'll just hold it on paper so she can't touch it." Isaac's brow furrowed with worry, but he agreed to help, understanding the desperate situation his brother was in. By the afternoon, with Marcus's guidance, Cameron had completed all the authorization paperwork. He deleted the text messages from his phone and secured the copies of the contracts in his safe. When he returned home, Angela was late again. No explanation, just a tired sigh as she dropped her handbag onto a chair. Over dinner, she made a few empty remarks, and Cameron replied softly, his mind already somewhere else. That night, the wind rustled in the garden, and the chirping of crickets created a sorrowful soundtrack. Angela slept soundly, oblivious to Cameron's turmoil on the other side of the bed. He stared at the ceiling, mentally rehearsing the next steps of his plan. He was no longer alone. He had Marcus for legal counsel and Isaac for financial support. And now, he began to think about how he would expose both of them, publicly and painfully. Following his lawyer's advice, Cameron canceled their joint credit cards, citing suspicious activity as the reason. Angela was slightly surprised, but didn't seem to care much, as she had grown accustomed to using her own card. She hadn't yet noticed the subtle seismic shifts occurring within their home. Cameron began to act busier, spending more time at construction sites and in his office. In reality, he had quietly hired a young IT specialist named Brooke to manage his company's technical infrastructure and help secure all his business data. Brooke was professional and discreet, asking no questions and focusing solely on encrypting his emails and blocking any potential security breaches. Meanwhile, Angela, believing Cameron was oblivious, grew bolder in her carelessness. She would talk on her phone, her voice light and full of laughter, dropping revealing phrases like, "Don't worry, he has no idea." Cameron, standing just out of sight, would listen to her airy tones, the sound of a woman still floating from a secret rendezvous. The familiar numbness returned, but he suppressed it, waiting for the right moment to bring everything into the light. He started digging online for information about Trevor. The man was an HR director who had been involved in a minor scandal a year ago, though it seemed to have been quietly resolved. Trevor had divorced his wife around the same time, and rumors suggested the ex-wife had been deeply hurt. Cameron didn't know the full story, but he knew this man was slick cunning enough to have charmed his way into Angela's life. One afternoon, Cameron met Isaac at their usual cafe. He pushed a folder of documents across the table. "Look this over," he said. "This transfer is in name only. As soon as this is all over, I'll take it back." Isaac scanned the papers and sighed. "I hate to say it, Cam, but you should prepare yourself. What if she tries to turn this around on you?" Cameron's lips thinned. "I have the upper hand. Don't worry, Marcus has thought of everything." A few days later, he received a call from Fiona. Her voice trembled as if she had something important to say. They agreed to meet at a small cafe on the outskirts of town. When Cameron arrived, she was huddled in a corner, her face etched with anxiety. "I know," she began, her voice a mixture of fear and guilt. "I know about Angela and Trevor. I was so worried she was making a mistake, but I didn't dare interfere. She told me she was waiting for the right time to leave you." At this, Fiona looked down, unable to meet his eyes. Cameron took a slow, deep breath. "I don't blame you," he said calmly, "but I need you to understand how far this has gone." Fiona nodded, her eyes welling with tears. She told him how Angela had bragged about Trevor's wealth and his promises of a more upscale life. Fiona had tried to warn her against the betrayal, but Angela, convinced Cameron was a fool, had ignored her. Listening to her, Cameron felt a sharp pain in his chest. He never imagined his wife harbored such materialistic ambitions. He also learned that he wasn't the only one being deceived. Angela had lied to Fiona as well, pretending her affair hadn't become physical while simultaneously flaunting her infatuation with Trevor. Confused and torn, Fiona finally confessed she would help Cameron by revealing some of Angela's plans, like the birthday party she was planning at their house. She intended to invite Trevor, hoping to showcase her new status. As soon as Cameron heard this, a plan began to form in his mind. That evening, he sat down with Marcus. "I want to turn her birthday party into the place where all the lies end. Is that too risky?" Marcus gave a wry smile. "You want to stage a scene, that's fine. But be careful how you gather your evidence. Make sure you don't break any laws." Cameron nodded. He thought about installing a few hidden cameras and audio recorders to capture the moments when Angela and Trevor let their guard down. 3 days later, he discreetly placed a tiny microphone behind the fireplace mantel in the living room, a spot where guests often gathered. He hid mini-cameras in the blind spots of the house. The trap was slowly being set, all leading up to Angela's birthday. As the new month began, Angela eagerly prepared for her birthday party. Cameron feigned interest, asking, "Who do you want to invite? How can I help?" Angela beamed, listing off family, close friends, co-workers, and of course, her boss Trevor, to maintain a good relationship. Cameron nodded, a bitter, ironic smile playing on his lips. The Knoxville weather was dry and crisp hot during the day, but cool at night. Cameron busied himself hanging decorative lights in the garden and buying fresh flowers, while Angela hired a catering service. As she enthusiastically reviewed the menu, Cameron quietly assessed every corner of the house, checking the placement of his hidden cameras and microphones. One morning, Fiona came over to help clean. Cameron pulled her aside and asked about Angela's plans with Trevor. "She was bragging that Trevor bought her a new dress for the party," Fiona said reluctantly. "She's so sure you still don't know anything." Cameron narrowed his eyes, picturing Angela, radiant and triumphant, convinced her husband was being led by the nose. A surge of anger rose in him, but he pushed it down. The more naive I seem, he thought, the deeper she'll fall into the trap. That afternoon, he caught Angela whispering on the phone. "Trevor, don't worry," she cooed. "It'll be a big crowd. No one will notice us. I'll give you the signal." Her voice was sweet as honey. Standing behind the door, Cameron felt his heart turn to ice. To hide his presence, he cleared his throat and stepped into the room. Angela quickly hung up and turned to him with a forced smile. Just a colleague talking about work. As the day of the party approached, Cameron arranged the furniture, checked the sound system, and organized the drinks. He had installed another small camera near the bookshelf, and Angela, too preoccupied to notice, even praised him for being so thoughtful and meticulous. He looked at her, managed a bright smile, and thought of the moment he would finally reveal his hand in front of everyone. On the final evening before the party, Angela listed the guests one last time. Isaac, both our parents, Fiona, and we should definitely invite Trevor, his company's director, and a few of his associates. What do you think? Cameron pretended to hesitate, then nodded. Of course, the more, the merrier. Angela seemed deeply satisfied. Her eyes gleamed with a confident sparkle, as if she were planning to not only show off for Trevor, but to show the world that she and her lover had nothing to fear. The night before the party, Cameron feigned exhaustion and went to bed early. As soon as Angela turned off the lights, he slipped into his office, opened his laptop, and tested the hidden cameras. The living room, kitchen, and foyer all appeared in crystal-clear detail. He did a test recording, the only sound the quiet whir of the ceiling fan. Everything was ready. His gaze fell on the old wedding photo on his desk. Angela in her white dress, him in an oversized suit because money had been tight back then. They were both smiling, radiant with hope. Now the photo looked like a faded, worn-out relic, a reminder of something beautiful that was gone forever. He let out a slow breath, closed the laptop, and let the darkness envelop him. On the morning of Angela's birthday, the house was bathed in sunlight. Caterers set up tables and arranged appetizers in the garden. A floral arch stood on the porch, and bouquets of fresh flowers adorned the main hall. The atmosphere was one of elegant, warm celebration. Angela, dressed in a stunning red dress, her hair in soft curls, stood before the mirror, smiling with satisfaction. Cameron was also dressed for the occasion in a crisp white shirt and dark trousers. He let his wife take center stage, playing the role of the gracious host. She moved through the rooms, checking every detail, her eyes sparkling with excitement. Guests began to arrive in the early afternoon. Isaac brought Cameron's parents, and Angela's parents arrived soon after, looking equally thrilled. Fiona and a few mutual friends gathered in a corner of the yard, chatting animatedly. Trevor arrived about an hour later, carrying a beautifully wrapped gift. He wore a tailored gray suit, his hair perfectly coiffed, exuding an air of easy wealth. He shook Cameron's hand as if they were old friends. Cameron played the part of the cordial host, welcoming him inside. Angela, busy with other guests, simply exchanged a knowing glance and a quick smile with him. They were trying to be discreet, but not discreet enough to escape Fiona's watchful eyes. Cameron continued his performance as the doting husband, giving guests tours of the house, which conveniently created opportunities for Angela and Trevor to exchange private, longing looks. He knew that every corner they turned, every step they took, was being recorded. Soft jazz played as guests mingled, laughing and talking. Around 7 o'clock, Angela gathered everyone in the living room for the cake and a toast. She spoke in a sweet, cheerful voice, a picture of a woman blissfully happy with her husband. Cameron nodded and took the microphone, a simple gesture to command everyone's attention. He cleared his throat. "Before we all wish Angela a happy birthday," he began, "there's something I'd like to share." The room fell silent. Angela, seated in the center of the room with a glass of wine in her hand, looked slightly surprised. Trevor stood a short distance away, arms crossed, a confident smirk on his face. Fiona held her breath. Isaac watched his brother, his body tense. Cameron smiled, a calm, placid expression on his face. He pressed a button on the remote in his hand. The large television screen on the wall flickered to life. For a few seconds there was only static. Then a clear image appeared. Angela and Trevor at the bar of the boutique hotel, her head resting on his shoulder, both of them beaming. A collective gasp went through the crowd. Another clip played, a screen recording of their text messages, with a computerized voice reading Trevor's words aloud. "Last night was unforgettable. Can't wait till he's out of the picture." The air grew thick, heavy as lead. Angela's wine glass slipped from her fingers, shattering on the floor and splattering red wine like blood. Trevor's face went pale as he glanced around the room. Angela's parents stared in horror. Cameron's parents were speechless, while Isaac's hands were clenched into tight fists. More images flashed across the screen. Angela whispering on the phone, her voice filled with a passion meant only for Trevor. Each word echoed in the dead silence. There was no room for denial. The room erupted in a wave of shock. Murmurs turned into whispers, and someone cried out, "Oh my God!" Angela shot to her feet, her voice cracking. "Stop it! Stop this right now!" She lunged for the TV, but Cameron held the remote. He calmly switched it off and stood tall, his gaze sweeping across the room. "I'm sorry to have shocked everyone," he said, his voice steady. "But this is the truth I wanted you all to see." The room was suffocating. Angela looked around, her face flushed, tears streaming down her cheeks. Trevor set his gift down and started to back away, clearly looking for an escape. Trevor's own boss, who was also a guest, looked on, stunned. A few people started recording with their phones, which only made Trevor panic more. "It's a misunderstanding," he stammered. Cameron held up a hand. "You don't need to say anything. I have all the evidence I need. I just wanted everyone here to know the truth. As of today, Angela will no longer be in my will or a beneficiary to any of my assets." Angela burst into sobs and rushed to him, grabbing his arm. "Don't do this. I'm begging you. It was just a moment of weakness." She practically fell to her knees, pleading. Beside her, Trevor was sweating, humiliated under the contemptuous stares of the crowd. Cameron stepped back, his voice as cold as ice. "This wasn't a moment of weakness. You betrayed me for a long time, and you were planning to leave me. I'm sorry I had to do this on your birthday, but perhaps now you'll understand how it feels to be so cruelly deceived." The room was frozen. Just then, Trevor's boss shouted, "Trevor, this behavior is unacceptable. The company will be taking disciplinary action." "This is a disgrace." Trevor's face drained of all color as he tried to argue, but no one was listening. Angela stood stranded and sobbing in a circle of family and friends, all of them whispering, their sympathy clearly with Cameron. Fiona was crying softly. Isaac walked over and put a supportive arm around his brother's shoulder. Cameron took a deep breath, his eyes blazing with resolve. He looked around the room one last time. "I apologize for the storm tonight, but I couldn't live with the lies any longer. I hope you all enjoy the rest of your evening. You'll be leaving now." He turned and walked out the door, leaving behind the sound of a woman he once loved more than life itself collapsing, and the stunned gasps of a crowd still reeling from the revelation. The festive lights blurred in Angela's vision as she realized she had just lost everything. Stepping outside, Cameron was still dressed in his crisp white shirt and dark trousers. The Knoxville night was cool, a gentle breeze rustling through the trees. He drew a deep breath, trying to steady the dizzying mix of emotions swirling inside him. The moment the door closed, he felt as if he had escaped a suffocating cage, but the grief was as heavy as a stone. His pickup truck was parked on the street, a small suitcase with essential documents already packed in the back. He leaned against the tailgate and looked up at the star-filled sky. Neighbors, drawn by the commotion, were peering out their windows, curious but hesitant to ask. He stood there for a few minutes, replaying the image of Angela's numb face, her choked sobs. He wondered how a love so beautiful could end in such a ruinous way. Isaac hurried out, his face grim. "Cam, are you okay?" Cameron took another deep breath and nodded. His brother, always looking out for him. Isaac squeezed his shoulder. "If you need me, he'll be here. Or if you want to go somewhere, I can drive." "Thanks, Isaac," Cameron said softly. "I think I'll get a hotel for the night. This house. Let her deal with the fallout." Isaac agreed, stepping back to let him leave. Just as Cameron started the engine, the front door flew open again. Angela rushed out, about to call his name, but he hit the gas and pulled away, leaving only the soft squeal of tires behind. Her figure shrank in the rearview mirror. The party lights still glowed, but now they illuminated a scene of chaos and devastation. Cameron drove to a hotel downtown and checked into a small, simple room. The walls were painted a pale gray, the space tidy but impersonal. He set down his suitcase and looked at his reflection in the mirror. His face was gaunt, his eyes hollow. All the pent-up emotions had finally erupted on his wife's birthday. He remembered her smug words, how she was so sure he'd never know. His heart still ached, but mingled with the pain was an undeniable sense of release. The next morning, he woke early and called Marcus, giving him a brief summary of the previous night. Marcus was calm. "You've handled the public part," he said. "Now it's time for the legal endgame." When Cameron arrived at the red brick building, Marcus greeted him with a firm handshake. "I want the divorce as soon as possible," Cameron said, his voice low. "And I don't want her to get a thing." Marcus nodded. "We have the recordings, the videos, everything. Legally, you have all the leverage." While Marcus discussed the procedures, Cameron called Isaac to update him. Isaac told him Angela was a wreck, and her parents were furious. Trevor had been suspended from work, pending termination. The story was spreading, painting Angela as a gold digger. A flicker of pity crossed Cameron's mind, but he quickly extinguished it. He remembered the smile she'd given Trevor, her whisper about wanting him out of the picture. This wasn't a mistake. It was a calculated plan. Near noon, as Cameron was leaving the law office, he found Fiona waiting outside. She approached him hesitantly. I'm so sorry I didn't warn you sooner." Cameron shook his head. "It's okay. She wouldn't have listened to you anyway. But thank you for telling me what you did." Fiona looked down, her eyes moist. "I feel so guilty watching her go down that path, but she was just so reckless." That afternoon, Cameron went back to his company, briefing his employees on operational plans for the coming months. Most were unaware of his personal turmoil, only seeing a boss who was newly decisive and focused. He finished his paperwork, locked his office, and drove back to the hotel. The spring weather in Knoxville was unpredictable, but today the sky was clear and the wind gentle, as if trying to soothe his weary soul. Back in his room, Cameron sat alone in an armchair, replaying everything. His life had turned a corner last night. The house had lost its meaning as a home, now just a place of painful memories. He pictured Angela's face on their wedding day and compared it to the person she had become. They were two different people. He closed his eyes, unconsciously whispering her name, not sure if he was comforting himself or still mourning what he'd lost. Then he sighed, stood up, and opened his laptop. An email from Marcus was waiting, an update on expediting the divorce proceedings. He read it with a grim nod. It was time to close this chapter, officially and completely. In the days that followed, Cameron initiated the divorce proceedings. He sent the file to his lawyer, complete with all the evidence of adultery, the video of Angela and Trevor at the hotel, the intimate text messages, and a log of her lies. One morning, Angela called him, her voice hoarse. "Cam, please come home. Can we just talk, one last time? I know I was wrong." He hesitated for a moment but agreed, wanting to see for himself what she had to say. That afternoon, he returned to the house he had built, now heavy with a somber atmosphere. Angela sat on the sofa, her hair a mess, her eyes swollen and red. She looked at Cameron and burst into tears. "I know I messed up," she sobbed. I just got caught up in his empty promises. Now Trevor lost his job and I've lost you. I've lost everything. I'm so scared." Cameron leaned against the wooden wall, his gaze empty. "What do you want, Angela?" She trembled. "I want you to give me another chance. You'll make it right, I promise." Cameron clenched his fists, fighting back a wave of anger. "A chance? You plan to leave me, to use me for my money. Do you think a simple "I'm sorry" can fix that? I was wrong," she wailed. "I didn't want this. Trevor, he manipulated me." Cameron looked at the face of the woman he had spent 20 years with. There were so many moments of pure happiness, but he could no longer feel any sincerity in her words. "It's over," he said, his voice flat. "I'm filing for divorce. You can discuss the settlement with my lawyer, but don't expect much. Most of the assets are in my name or have already been transferred to Isaac. Angela collapsed, grabbing his legs and begging. He gently removed her hands, his expression cold as stone. I'm sorry, Angela, but I can't keep lying to myself. I'm leaving this house today. With that, he turned and walked away without a second thought. Angela sank to the floor, her cries echoing in the empty house. Things at Angela's workplace were just as dire. The rumors of her affair had spread like wildfire, and with Trevor fired, the pressure on her was immense. She tried to hold on, but eventually resigned. The house that once rang with laughter was now a hollow, silent space where she was left to confront her belated regret. As for Cameron, he threw himself into his work. He occasionally saw Fiona, who shared updates on Angela's downward spiral. He listened but showed no emotion. His own wounds were too fresh. Another moment of weakness would only lead to more pain. One afternoon, Cameron drove back to Marcus' office. The lawyer informed him that the divorce proceedings were nearly complete, and a court date would be set soon. We have all the evidence, Marcus said. You won't have to pay alimony or give up a significant portion of your assets. Even the house will likely be awarded to you. Cameron exhaled slowly. An image of the first bricks he'd laid for their home flashed in his mind. How can I ever forget this pain if I live there? He thought. After a moment, he replied, Let me think about it. He'll probably sell it or rent it out. It would be too hard to live there again. Marcus nodded, offering no further comment. That evening, Cameron ate a simple meal in his hotel room. The city lights began to sparkle outside his window. He sat there, wondering where his future would lead. 20 years of marriage had shattered, and love had vanished like smoke. But he also felt a sense of lightness, because he was finally free from the web of deceit. On the day of the court hearing, Angela appeared looking haggard in a simple black dress. She wore no makeup, her lips pale and chapped. Cameron arrived with Marcus, carrying a thick file of evidence. When they saw each other in the hallway, Angela averted her gaze, as if in fear. The hearing was swift and decisive. The evidence of adultery from text messages and photos to the video from the party was irrefutable. Angela couldn't contest it, and she couldn't afford a competent lawyer to defend her. As the judge reviewed the facts, Cameron remained silent. Marcus presented their case, formally requesting the dissolution of the marriage. Angela sobbed quietly, mumbling apologies, but the court was not concerned with personal feelings. In the end, Cameron was granted full ownership of the house, the company, and their vehicles. Angela was awarded a small sum of money to start over. She stumbled out of the courtroom on trembling legs, likely never having imagined her life could fall apart so completely. Outside the courthouse, Cameron took a deep breath. The sky seemed clearer, brighter. Isaac was waiting for him and clapped him on the shoulder. It's over, Cam. You can finally breathe. Cameron nodded, a sad smile on his face. Though he knew this outcome was what she deserved, a part of him still mourned the beautiful love they once shared. A few weeks later, Angela quietly packed her belongings and left the house. She rented a small apartment in a modest neighborhood. Jobless and ostracized, she struggled to find new work. Fiona visited her from time to time, but their friendship was strained, fractured by the devastating choices Angela had made. Trevor was officially fired. An internal investigation even uncovered previous complaints of harassment against him. He was now facing legal troubles and mounting debt. No one in the city wanted to hire someone with his reputation. He and Angela no longer spoke, each left to bear the consequences of their actions alone. Cameron remained in the hotel for a while longer. He would occasionally visit the house to meet with real estate agents, discussing the possibility of selling or leasing it. Every time he stepped inside the familiar space, the wound in his heart would throb. Happy memories would surface, only to be instantly erased by the bitter sting of betrayal. One afternoon, he stood in the middle of the living room, the site of the fateful birthday party. The wine stain was gone, but its ghost remained in his mind. He ran a hand over the wood-paneled wall he had installed himself, remembering how he and Angela used to joke and splash paint on each other while they worked. He knew he couldn't change the past, but he had to accept the present. Cameron decided it was time to move out completely. One morning, he drove his truck to the house and began loading his most important possessions, his file cabinets, a few family keepsakes, and personal items. He left most of the furniture behind. Isaac was there to help with the heavy boxes. They worked in a comfortable silence, a wordless understanding passing between them. As they were finishing, Fiona appeared at the door with a bag of fruit. I just wanted to say goodbye," she said hesitantly, "and wish you all the best." Cameron set down a box and wiped the sweat from his brow, offering a small smile. "Thank you, Fiona." Fiona's eyes swept across the house. "This place held so many beautiful memories," she sighed. "It's such a shame." Cameron just nodded, saying nothing more. After locking the door, he took one last look at the house. In the slanted afternoon light, it no longer radiated warmth. It was just a building, a shell devoid of the spirit of a family. He remembered Marcus' words, "You have every right to keep it." But he had chosen to leave. What was the point of staying when his heart was broken within its walls? With his truck fully loaded, Cameron drove away, leaving the empty house behind. He spent the next few days settling into a serviced apartment near the city center. It was a temporary space, but at least he wouldn't be confronted by old ghosts every day. He poured his energy into work, restructuring his company and planning for the future. This painful chapter had, in a strange way, become an opportunity for renewal. After work, he took up running along the Tennessee River. The cool air and the scent of the water and woods soothed his soul. Thoughts of Angela still surfaced from time to time, but he learned to let them go, focusing instead on the vast expanse of the sky as the sunset painted the water in shades of orange and red. His friends and family noticed a change in him. He was quieter, but also more resolute and driven. He cut his hair shorter, and his physique grew leaner from his new exercise regimen. The wound in his heart hadn't fully healed, but he was choosing to live, not drown in his sorrow. One evening, he was sitting in a cafe reviewing plans for a new housing project. Fiona joined him, placing a cup of tea on the table. "How are you holding up?" she asked gently. He nodded and smiled. This time he felt at ease with her, the earlier awkwardness and sadness gone. "Angela," Fiona began cautiously. "I heard she might be facing legal action over the credit card debt she racked up with Trevor." Cameron simply shook his head. That was her choice. They sat in silence for a few more minutes. As they were leaving, Fiona touched his hand, her eyes full of a sad sympathy. "I wish none of this had ever happened. You deserve to be happy." Cameron gently withdrew his hand and smiled. "Thanks, Fiona. It'll be okay." The night breeze felt cool against his skin. He looked up at the sky and remembered a quote he'd once heard. "Sometimes, storms are needed to clear away the rot and make way for the sun." He hoped that after this storm, his life could truly begin anew. Nearly 2 months later, Cameron received the final divorce decree. He was legally single again. The last of the pressure lifted, though the painful memories remained. He charted a new course for himself, focusing on growing his company and pursuing his passion for sustainable building. One morning, Marcus called. "Cameron, it's all done. I also wanted to let you know that Angela filed a petition for spousal support, but the court denied it given the evidence of her infidelity." "Good," Cameron replied, his voice cool. "I hope she finds a way to get back on her feet." The next day, he left his office and drove east, toward the Smoky Mountains. An urge to escape the suffocating city had been building within him. He turned on his favorite country music station and let the scenery wash over him, winding roads, dense forests, dotted with wildflowers. He stopped at a small, charming lodge run by an elderly couple. The owner warmly pointed him toward a beautiful hiking trail that led to a rocky creek. Cameron grabbed his camera and a small backpack and began the short trek. The air was crisp and clean, filled with the scent of damp earth and fallen maple leaves that carpeted the ground in gold. He followed the sound of the babbling creek, its clear water sparkling as sunlight filtered through the canopy above. A cool breeze sent a shiver down his spine, but it felt exhilarating. He found a large boulder by the water's edge and sat down, listening to the bird song and the gentle murmur of the stream. In that moment, he felt truly free, no longer entangled in lies, no longer afraid of being used. As he took a few photos, he remembered his old dream of exploring the great mountain ranges, a dream he'd abandoned because Angela had no interest in the wilderness. Now he could do whatever he wanted, with no one to complain or disapprove. He spent the next few days in the mountains, cleansing his mind. He focused on each step of his hikes, each breath, each detail of the world around him. It was a form of healing. In the evenings, back at the lodge, he would review his photos, a soft smile touching his lips. This felt like the beginning of a new chapter 1, where he could forgive the past and make room for hope. When he returned to Knoxville, he felt re-energized. He started sharing his business experience with young people passionate about construction. He spoke at conferences about green materials and sustainable design. The applause and the admiring looks from the audience reaffirmed his sense of purpose. Back at the company, Isaac finalized the paperwork, officially transferring full ownership back to Cameron. Everything was back in its rightful place. Cameron smiled and pulled his brother into a hug. "Thank you," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "for getting me through the worst of it." Isaac clapped him on the back. "You gave me a job and taught me everything I know. Of course I was going to have your back." The gossip about Angela and Trevor continued to circulate. Some said Angela was now working as a cashier at a small supermarket, her face always sad. Trevor had reportedly tried to move to another city to escape his tarnished reputation. Cameron sometimes wondered if their downfall was a fitting price for their betrayal. He took no pleasure in their failure, but he felt no pity either. One afternoon, he was walking downtown and passed by an old furniture store. He and Angela had once browsed there, picking out a few wooden chairs. The memory surfaced, then faded without a sting. Instead of sadness, he felt a sense of detachment, as if it were a story about someone else. That night, he got a call from Fiona. She sounded hesitant. Angela had apparently reached out to her, desperate and in debt, hoping Cameron might help. "I don't want to be involved," Cameron said, his voice firm. "Her debts are her own choices." Fiona sighed. "I understand, but she's in a really bad place. Okay, if you don't want to, I won't push it." After hanging up, Cameron sat in the quiet of his apartment. He picked up the old notebook where he had documented all of Angela's lies. Each entry was a sharp reminder, a warning against letting his guard down. People had to bear their own consequences. He had just found his own fragile peace. There was no reason to get entangled in her chaos again. To keep his mind occupied, Cameron began planning a new workshop in the suburbs, specializing in reclaimed antique wood. The project excited his client base, who trusted his commitment to quality and craftsmanship. The busyness of this new venture helped him forget his personal sorrows. His life settled into a new rhythm, working, running along the river at sunset, and sharing a beer with Isaac while watching a football game. Life went on, and he was choosing to look forward. As time passed, Cameron's reputation in the local construction community grew, thanks to his focus on environmentally friendly building practices. Young apprentices, inspired by his vision, sought him out. Every morning, he drove to the workshop and patiently taught them everything from cutting wood to framing a house. If Angela hadn't cheated, he sometimes thought, I would have never stepped out of my comfort zone to expand my career like this. His busy days were interspersed with moments of quiet peace. One afternoon, he took photos of his workers as they assembled a frame, their shirts soaked with sweat, their faces bright with smiles. He loved capturing the honest beauty of labor. That night, looking at the photos, he chuckled at the playful antics of his young crew. This simple joy was proof he was on the right path. One day, Isaac brought his wife and children to the workshop with a picnic lunch for everyone. The sound of the kids laughing and running around warmed the entire space. Cameron held his 2-year-old nephew, feeling the warmth of the small body in his arms. He briefly wondered if he might have been a father by now had his marriage survived, but the thought passed without regret. Fate had led him down a different path. At night, he would sit at the wooden desk in his apartment, typing on his laptop and sipping coffee. His window looked out onto the street, where the headlights of passing cars created fleeting patterns of light. The solitude was sometimes lonely, but it also gave him the quiet space to reflect on the past and appreciate the present. He started reading books on psychology and self-healing. He saw himself in the words, "After a great loss, do not be afraid to open your heart again, for human connection is a fundamental need." He smiled faintly and jotted down a few lines that resonated with him. One weekend, Fiona invited him out for coffee. 2 steaming cappuccinos sat between them. She was wearing a lovely floral dress, her expression a little nervous. They chatted about work, and then she asked timidly, "Do you see me as a friend? Or do you still blame me for not stopping Angela sooner?" Cameron placed his hand on his warm mug and shook his head. "That's all in the past. If anything, I'm grateful to you for helping me find the truth, even if it was late." Fiona looked relieved, and their conversation became more open. On a whim, she suggested they go to an art exhibit together that weekend. Cameron found himself agreeing. On Saturday afternoon, he picked her up from the school where she taught. Seeing her bright, genuine smile, he realized it had been a long time since he had felt so comfortable with a woman. He wasn't thinking about the future, but he knew something in his heart was slowly starting to thaw. One morning, Cameron stepped onto the balcony of his apartment and watched the sun rise over the rooftops of Knoxville. The dawn was a brilliant gold, and the air carried the faint scent of spring blossoms. He brewed a cup of hot tea and sipped it, remembering he had an important meeting that day, signing a contract for a major new housing development. His company's brand was becoming well known, a testament to his persistent efforts. Before leaving, he received a text from Fiona. "Good luck today. See you tonight?" He smiled and typed back, "Thanks. See you then." A quiet warmth spread through his chest. It wasn't a fiery, all-consuming love, but something like a small seedling, needing time and care to grow. After the successful signing, Cameron left the client's headquarters and stepped out into the clear blue sky. He shook hands with Isaac, who was also a partner on the new project. They talked excitedly about the opportunities ahead. A deep sense of satisfaction washed over him, and he was reminded of the time when he had hit rock bottom. Now, things were finally looking up, as if he had weathered the storm and could see a rainbow in the distance. That evening, he drove to the small cafe by the river where he was meeting Fiona. She was sitting at a table by the window, wearing a cream-colored sweater. She waved and smiled when she saw him. They ordered 2 cups of tea and talked about everything and nothing the upcoming art exhibit. Funny stories from her classroom, his business plans. As the conversation quieted, Fiona reached across the table and touched his hand, her eyes full of empathy. "You've been through so much, but you're still standing. It's truly admirable." Cameron looked down at their hands and felt a sense of peace. He understood then that maybe fate had used Angela's mistakes as a catalyst, pushing him toward a different path, one that had been difficult, but was now opening up to the hope of a happier future. That night, back in his apartment, he caught his reflection in the mirror and saw a faint smile on his lips, gentle and real. He placed a hand on his chest. "I may have lost someone who wasn't worthy of me," he thought, "but I found my freedom, my dignity, and maybe even a beautiful friendship." A soft night breeze rustled the curtains. He set his keys on the table, brewed a cup of ginger tea, and switched on a warm lamp. In the quiet, he remembered a line from a book he had read. "Sometimes an ending is a gift. It frees you from the wrong path and gives you the chance to find the right one." Now, he understood that more deeply than ever. The turbulent journey he had endured was a final test, forcing him to recognize the true value of freedom and self-respect. Maybe one day he would meet someone who truly loved him, or maybe he would be content with his peaceful, single life. Either way, he had walked through the storm and emerged with his head held high. Outside his window, the lights of Knoxville twinkled. Cameron sipped his tea, his gaze distant, a quiet smile on his face. He knew he had closed the door on a painful past and was ready to welcome whatever good things lay ahead. And in that moment, he whispered to himself, "I lost a liar, but in return, I found myself. And that is the most precious thing of all."